This morning we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 18, Text 2. Rama kopot hitadyastu takshakat pranaviplavat na samumo harubayat bhagavatya pitashaya. Word for word. Rama kopa, fury of a Brahmana. Utitat, caused by. What was. To, but. Takshakat, by the snake bird. Pranaviplavat, from the dissolution of life. Na, never. Samumoha, was overwhelmed. Urubayat, great fear. Bhagavati, under the personality of Godhead. Apita, surrendered. Ashaya, consciousness. Translation. Furthermore, Maharaj Parikshit was always consciously surrendered to the personality of Godhead, and therefore he was neither afraid nor overwhelmed by fear due to a snake bird which was to bite him because of the fury of a Brahmana boy. Translation, please repeat. Furthermore, Maharaj Parikshit was consciously surrendered to the personality of Godhead, and therefore he was neither afraid nor overwhelmed by fear due to a snake bird which was to bite him because of the fury of a Brahmana boy. Purport: a self-surrendered devotee of the Lord is called Narayana Parayana. Such a person is never afraid of any place or person, not even of death. For him nothing is as important as the Supreme Lord, and thus he gives equal importance to heaven and hell. He knows well that both heaven and hell are creations of the Lord, and similarly life and death are different conditions of existence created by the Lord. But in all conditions and in all circumstances, remembrance of Narayana is essential. The Narayana Parayana practices this constantly. Maharaj Parikshit was such a pure devotee. He was wrongfully cursed by an inexperienced son of a Brahmana who was under the influence of Kali, and Maharaj Parikshit took this to be sent by Narayana. He knew that Narayana, Lord Krishna, had saved him when he was burnt in the womb of his mother, and if he were to be killed by a snake bite, it would also take place by the will of the Lord. The devotee never goes against the will of the Lord. Anything sent by God is a blessing for a devotee, for the devotee. Therefore, Maharaj Parikshit was neither afraid of nor bewildered by such things. That is the sign of a pure devotee of the Lord. Brahma koputhiratyastu takshakat pranaviplavat na samu moha harubayat bhagavat yapitashaya. Furthermore, Maharaj Parikshit was always consciously surrendered to the personality of God, and therefore he was neither afraid nor overwhelmed by fear due to a snake bird which was to bite him because of the fury of a Brahmana boy. This is a very famous story, of course, of Maharaj Parikshit and his birth. Actually, in yesterday's purport, Prabhupada commented that Maharaj Parikshit had a wonderful birth and a wonderful death. Generally, karmis refer to wonderful births, but they don't refer to wonderful deaths. Something they abhor, a death, they're afraid of death. And this is mentioned here. That and actually, one of the 5 Nessian activities in the 3rd canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Lord Brahma created 5 Nessian activities, and one is the fear of death, and self-delusion and what is it? Anger after frustration, like that. So ignorance of one. Now fear, of course, comes from ignorance. And so Maharaj Parikshit was never in ignorance. And he was always remembering the Supreme Personality, because he was able to have the vision of the Lord even before he was born. So before he was born, and then in his birth, all auspicious. He was very, very fortunate to have the darshan of the Lord. And we were having that discussion yesterday about the translation said he wasn't burned, but actually Prabhupada said he was burned. So, and then the body was actually, Prabhupada later on in another canto of the Bhagavatam explains that how Maharaj Parikshit, the body, the embryo was burnt completely, and Lord Krishna had restored it. So he was able to, see that, and he was already a great devotee, and that enhanced his mood of being a great devotee. And so throughout his whole life, he was always in remembrance. Prabhupada called a self-surrendered devotee like Parikshit Narayana Parayana. He's always remembering and self-surrendered. There is all sorts of surrender, like when there's a battle, there's a war, and then the opposing armies, they fight, and then one is victorious over the other, and the other one, surrenders. They surrender. But that's not, it's a kind of a self-surrender, but it's forced. Such a surrender is a forced surrender. And begrudgingly they do it. So some people are, they're forced to do things against their will. But and a materialist doesn't like that, of course. Against their will. Who likes against their will? And there's that old saying: "He who is forced against his will is of the same opinion still." That's the whole thing. Forced against your will, you remain the same opinion still. Generally, people are very stubborn. This also, stubbornness comes from the mode of ignorance, and of course ignorance, and then pride. When you're in ignorance, you start to, you don't understand properly what is your own position, and then you start to get so many ideas of who you are. And because of this contamination of the material world, then you become very proud, even over the smallest things. Anyway, Maharaj Parikshit, he was fully surrendered to Krishna, willingly, fully surrendered, and throughout the whole life. For him, nothing is as important as the Supreme Lord. And so Prabhupada describes. Now, this is a very amazing story of Maharaj Parikshit, and how Takshaka came and how he was cursed. This will be explained later on in the chapter. The story will be told by Sukadev Goswami, and how Sringi, who's that Rishi? So Samika Rishi was in the meditation, and Maharaj Parikshit. Now Prabhupada explains that by providence Maharaj Parikshit was out and about hunting. He got thirsty, and he came upon the hermitage, and Samika Rishi was in meditation. And of course, when he came into the hermitage, Samika was in meditation, was unaware. He was so absorbed. And Prabhupada says both Samika and Parikshit were great devotees, but this whole scenario was arranged. This is the only way it can be explained. But why? In one sense, when Maharaj Parikshit came in and he was ignored by Samika, and Samika, of course, was in meditation. Why Parikshit didn't understand that, why he got angry. Prabhupada explains that in one sense he should have got angry, because, to be ignored, that's a type of offense. There's all different levels of offense. You can verbally say something against someone, you can physically do something, but even to ignore someone, there's someone talking to you, everyone knows someone's talking to you, just ignore them, just don't do anything. That's like an offense. Hey, I'm talking to you, right? considered an offence. So it's a Prabhupada actually explains that in one sense it was proper. He is the king, and coming to even an enemy coming to one's home, the Vedic culture is such that he would be treated cordially, and he wouldn't even feel that he was an enemy, even though he was an enemy. So that's the Vedic system. So the king got angry, but then again, the king was a pure devotee. It was unnatural for him to get angry in this way towards Samika. I mean, he got angry towards Kali. That was rightful anger. The kings, the rulers, have to exhibit anger. So when anger is exhibited properly, it's control. Very, very advanced personalities can use anger in the service of the Lord. And so towards Kali, he was angry, that was proper. But towards Samika, one would, looking at it at a distance, well, this is not proper. Why was Parikshit Maharaj like that? It's Samika Rishi after he's in meditation, he's unaware of the situation. And then we know the story how he became so angry he didn't answer, and he placed a dead snake around his neck, garland of a dead snake. So that was offensive in itself. So there was offences. He took offence that Samika didn't respond to him, and then he placed a dead snake around his neck. So this type of thing is an overreaction. All right, someone didn't answer you, well then you're going to get a dead snake, and heaven forbid it actually wasn't a dead snake, it was a live snake. So you have to be careful how you react to situations. Someone may have done something wrong, but how you react to it can be worse than what they originally did. And so this was going on. So it's and then of course Sringi, his son, came, and his reaction was just way over the top again. That was another level. So you got the reactions and then reactions to reactions. This can be compounded, and one can it gets a very messy thing. One has to be very careful with these types of situations, and we sometimes see, and even in our own temple communities, there's some arguments going on, and someone says someone did something, someone reacts to that, someone else reacts to that, then it escalates. And I often say, just be very careful with these types of situations, because okay, what they did may have not been right, but what you're doing is 10 times worse. So we have to be very, very careful. So this whole situation escalated with Sringi cursing Maharaj Parikshit to be killed. All right, you put a gun, you put a dead snake around, I curse you to be killed. This was the king and emperor. So everyone, this whole situation escalated. So very, very, and then Takshaka came, the snake. He is referred to Takshakat, the snake bird. This whole place where this was told, where someone was, I think Vasu was giving a class, he talked about Shukratal, a place I've never been to, but I always wanted to go there, Shukratal. It's actually, at one time we were just about to go there. It's on the way to Haridwar and Rishikesh. It's about 120 k's kind of northeast from Delhi. And you go, Hastinapur is there on a little bit off the highway, and then you go up. And just before Haridwar, not just before, it's about an hour, a couple of hours, then you can go off to the west a little bit. Beautiful place. I've seen pictures of it. That's where we were, but we just somehow or other we never went there. But it's on the Ganga, and they have a lot of functions there. Bhagavad Sapta, so many things go on there, and it's a very beautiful place. This place where Sukadeva Goswami, when Maharaj Parikshit was bitten by Takshaka, he within 7 days, the curse, the bite, where he was going to die in 7 days from the bite. Very poisonous bite. The whole story. I think that's more told in the 12th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, isn't it? And so Takshakat, the snake bird. I remember Harisuri told me one time he was with Prabhupada in Vrindavan, in Krishna Balaram Temple, and he was in his room. It was like late at night, and then there was a sound, and Prabhupada said, "Did you hear that?" "Yes, Prabhupada. What was that?" He said, "That was a snake bird." That was a snake bird. So snake bird, I think in the modern, now actually a while ago, as far as Takshaka, he's like a Naga. He's the son of Kashyapa and Kadru, and he's like a Deva, but in the Naga sense, in the Naga, he's a Naga king, a snake king. And he's there, and he's kind of known in Bali, and I think Japan. Do they know about the snake bird? No? Someone told me in China there's a little bit, not everywhere, but a little bit of a concept of, dragon. The modern concept is the dragon, right? The dragon. The dragon is a snake bird. It's a very powerful snake, and when they shed their skin for the last time, they grow wings. That's the description, and they can fly. So in the modern idea of it is a dragon. So in Chinese culture, Japanese culture, so many cultures, they have dragons with the snakes, and apparently their venom is another level again. Another level again. If you get bitten by one of these dragons, of course these days they have the fire coming out of them. I don't know about them. I guess fire was like the poison, like the fire. They sweep you with fire. I don't know about where they get all that from, but anyway. So snake bird. So he was cursed, and Takshaka, I know a whole story there about Takshaka. He had a grudge against the Pandavas because, Arjuna came, and I think it was his brother, drove him out of the Kandava forest. Apparently the Takshaka lived nearby Kurukshetra, and there's a whole history there. And they had a whole kingdom, and it was Janminjoy, in revenge of his father being killed, and destroyed that whole town. And then had that yajna to kill all the snakes. So anyway, so we have the story of the snake bird, Shringi cursing him, and then Takshaka coming. But here, Maharaj Parikshit was not afraid. Now this is a very, very high level devotee. As I said, that fear is there with everyone in the material. Every conditioned soul, there's got to be fear. If there's ignorance, you've got to be afraid. No matter how tough and whatever you kind of come across, you're a tough, a street tough or something like that. You're a tough guy. Everyone's got fear. Everyone's got fear. It has to be there. Has to be there. Where there's ignorance, you're attached. You don't know your actual position. You don't understand the position of the Supreme Personality. You're thinking you're something of the world. You develop a concept. You get attached to all that. And when that is threatened in any way, whether it's intellectually or whether it's mentally or physically or whatever it is, there's fear there. There's anxiety and there's fear. So everyone's got fear. Fear and ultimately death. No one willingly dies, unless they're gone crazy or something like that. But everyone's afraid of death. So this fear, and to overcome bhaya, fear, abhaya, to overcome it, it can't be overcome. You'll always be afraid. But if someone becomes 100% a very high, elevated devotee of the Lord, this is not to be artificially what's the word? Artificially emulated, because even we are devotees, and Bhaktivinoda Thakur, I think I mentioned the other week, that Bhaktivinoda Thakur says there's different levels of people and there's different levels of devotees. There's ordinary devotees, there's somewhat advanced devotees, and then there's very great devotees. Very, very great devotees. And these very, very great devotees, of course, everyone can go along the path to trying to become a great devotee, although the great devotees never think that I am a great devotee. They are thinking that they are the lowliest of devotees. But nevertheless, the great devotees, they are actually on this level. And Prabhupada described it, he was not afraid. He was Narayana Parayana. He was not afraid. He was not afraid of any place or any person, and not even of death. And so actually, it is mentioned that Maharaj Parikshit, when he was cursed, he just took it. He understood that when Ashvatthama threw the Brahmastra, the Lord came and protected him. Of course, that was easily understandable as the will of the Lord, that by the will of the Lord, he came and protected Maharaj Parikshit. So he just fully understood that, and he's just surrendered, self-surrendered soul. And then when it came time at the end of his life, when he was cursed, somehow or other, he just thought, this is the will of the Supreme Personality of God. And he wasn't afraid. And in some places mentioned, he was actually looking forward to it. There was opportunity to prepare himself to go back home, back to Godhead. So now my time has come. The indication is there. All these things is a strange situation. Samika Rishi was there. Actually, when Samika Rishi came out of his meditation and he found out what Sringi, his son, had done, cursed the king, he was very upset. But nevertheless, you shouldn't have done that. Why did you do that? But nevertheless, Maharaj Parikshit, he just accepted it. This is just a very strange situation when seemingly more powerful forces go on. You may want to do something. There are more powerful forces that are stopping you doing things. It's out of your control. So this is the mood of a devotee. Even a beginning devotee, even for kami, says that verse, kamanyavadikara samapaleshu karat makamapalehitu mate sanglastvakami. You have a right to do your duty, but don't be attached to the results. This is the first step towards being a surrendered devotee. That you can work in the world, but the result you leave to the Supreme Personality of God. Quite often I get asked this question, how can we be surrendered to Krishna and do our work simultaneously? Well, Krishna gives the formula there. You work, but and then whatever happens, you just accept it. And if you may want a certain result, maybe that result didn't come, maybe something else happened, but you just accept it. If it came, that's Krishna's mercy. If it didn't come, that's also Krishna's mercy. So here, Prabhupada actually mentions that. Both the birth, the death, all these things, whatever happens, if it's God sent, here it is. The devotee never goes against the will of the Lord. Anything sent by God is a blessing. Whatever, if something happens, it's just totally out of your control. Now this is the sign of a pure devotee. The pure devotee sees it like that. Others, even beginning devotees, get all afraid, this, that, Speaking for myself, I'm totally on that platform. You get worried, you get in anxiety. So, what to speak of the materialists? They're totally, they just lose it. But even beginning devotees, unless one is on this high level, you cannot be like that. But for someone who actually is, and he sees it as a blessing. Whatever happens, something seemingly bad happens, something seemingly good. Because quite often we think the seemingly good, that's God's mercy. But the seemingly bad, that's, why did Krishna do that? Well, we start to think ourselves, why did Krishna do like that? I wouldn't have done like that. Someone told some new devotee said like that to me. If Krishna, arranged this thing like that, wouldn't it have been better if he did this? Well, why didn't he do it like that? Wouldn't that be better if he did it like that? Well, hey, you're talking about the Supreme Personality of God. His intelligence is a little bit more than yours. He sees the greater picture. We see just in front of our hand maybe, but he sees the greater picture. There are other things that he wants to happen. So even though as devotees we may have a very Krishna conscious plan that maybe other devotees think, yes, this is a very Krishna conscious plan. You should go ahead and do it. But somehow or other it doesn't come to fruition. And you may try in different ways and it still doesn't come. So after a while you start to think, well, maybe Krishna doesn't want this. Maybe Krishna wants something else. So to understand these types of things is not easy for especially beginning devotees. Beginning devotees can't always see the hand of God, the will of the Lord. Therefore is advised Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. How to understand. Some things are very obvious, some more advanced devotees can just see these things, but sometimes it's confusing. Is this the will of Krishna or is it not the will of Krishna? Maybe it's the will of something else. So therefore we need to take advice. But very advanced devotees, they know this is the will of God. So for us, we need to, take advice from others. What do you think? Do you think Krishna's wanting me to do this, like that, and other things? We shouldn't just presuppose that this is the will of Krishna. Just like I remember a story that Chandramukhi Swami told me, that he said that one time they were in, I forget where it was, but they were in Prabhupada's room. And then one disciple came in and said, Prabhupada, I had a dream of you last night. Oh. And you said this and you told me to do that and you told me the other thing, to do this and so many things. Prabhupada looked at him for a while. He said, that wasn't me. He said, that may have been a Bhuta, but that wasn't me. I never said that. So we think, and I told the story the other week of when Father Kelly came to see Prabhupada, and he said, sometimes in our religion we have one man comes and says, God wants me to do this, and then another man says, God wants me to do that, and they seem totally contradictory. How do we reconcile those types of things? And Prabhupada answered very wonderfully. He said, well, there is scripture, and in the scripture God gives directions. So if one man says that God told me to do this, but it goes against what it is scripture, and the other one says, then you can know, generally speaking, he said like that God, whether God said like that, him to do like that. Why would God say something that? And also then he said the sadhus, the guru, and they like the shastra. He said he quoted like that. So this was Father Kelly. So we don't know immediately what is the will of God. There are certain signs, but the pure devotees, Narayana Parayana, they know. And they never, and Prabhupada goes as far as emphasize, they never go against the will. They never go against the will. They're totally surrendered to the will of the Supreme Personality. Therefore, the pure devotees especially feel the protection and the shelter. So whatever happens to you, whether you're insulted, whether you're ignored, or no one's paying attention to me, you get all the prayers or something like that. One who is surrendered, or someone says something, someone does something, we feel the effect of that. We react to that quite often in a negative way. But the very, very advanced devotees, they're totally surrendered. They understand things. They always take shelter. They're always thinking, always meditating on Krishna. Even they're doing their activities, they are meditating on Krishna while they're doing their activities. I remember reading, I gave a class a while ago about Kadama Muni and Devahuti, how they became married. When Kadama Muni was a very austere rishi, living in a hermitage, living very, very austerely, and Narad Muni had visited the palace of Swayambhuva Manu and Satarupa, his queen, and was talking to Devahuti, the daughter, and she was thinking of getting married, and Narad Muni, who was started to talk about Kadama Muni. So just by telling her about him, she became very attracted to him, and then her parents said, well, at that time you start thinking of getting married, and she said, I heard about this Kadama Muni. So anyway, the parents went to see Kadama Muni, and he was in his hermitage, and he was in meditation. He was just in meditation, but when they came, he greeted them, and then they put the proposal, and he accepted it that this was something by the will of the Lord. But the point I'm making here is that when he was talking to me, there was a conversation going on, and he accepted even though he was just by himself and engaged in, he saw this as the will of the Lord. So many great personalities, Lord Brahma and everyone, so many. So he accepted it. But when he finished talking, there was a description of how he just went into meditation again. He would talk, and then he would go into meditation, and then he would talk again like that. And Prabhupada actually made a comment that this is a sign of pure devotee. They're just always thinking, they can talk, and then they just go into meditation, and then they talk. It's a very subtle thing that they're always Krishna, Krishna. You talk, and then Krishna, Krishna. You always. So this is a very, very advanced devotee. They're always absorbed in thinking of Krishna. So this was a blessing, Maharaj Pariksit. He was never afraid. He was never bewildered by such things. This is another thing, to be bewildered, you get confused. For very elevated devotees, they don't get confused. This confusion, again, is a sign of the ignorance, and it's destroyed by transcendental knowledge. So when one is actually situated on the topmost levels of transcendental knowledge, then there's no confusion. Doubts, what is that word? Tasmadagana, sambhuttam, richtam, gyanasam, chitvanam, samsam, atishtatishtabhara. The doubts, Krishna says to Arjuna, should be slashed by the weapon of the knowledge. Right? So if you've got doubts, well, I remember one godbrother of mine early on in the piece, he came to me and said, Ramai, he said, do you ever doubt that Krishna is God? Do you ever doubt that? I mean, do you ever have second thoughts about that? Even though, we've been devotees like 5-10 years already. And I said, well, maybe before I was a devotee I had doubts, but once I made that decision, I guess doubts come in other ways, but as far as Krishna, no, I've never. He said, I actually get some doubts sometimes. So, you have to be situated in transcendental knowledge. Yes, okay, there can be doubts, or you dislike how Krishna made an arrangement, why God did like that. Like that. And sometimes you curse God. When it's like little children, when they get what they want, they're all happy. When they, for a second, they don't get what they want, you're a bad daddy, you're a bad mummy. So we can be like that from time to time. So very kind of childish. But for a very, very elevated devotee, there's no confusion, no doubts, and they're just not afraid. And not only that, but Maharaj Parikshit saw it as a great opportunity. He saw it as a blessing, and he was able to prepare himself. He was already Krishna conscious, but he just wanted to intensify that even more. There's no end to becoming more and more advanced in Krishna consciousness. And so he wanted to intensify that, so that he went to that Sukratal, and he heard from Sukadev Goswami. It's a very wonderful story in this section of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So I'll just read this again if anyone has any questions or comments. Furthermore, Maharaj Parikshit was always consciously surrendered to the personality of Godhead, and therefore he was neither afraid nor overwhelmed by fear due to a snake bird which was to bite him because of the fury of a Brahmana boy. Yeah, so another word he Prabhupada uses is neither afraid nor overwhelmed. Sometimes, someone you can get paralyzed by fear, and you just can't do anything, can't function. So that's another thing that can happen, but that doesn't happen, of course, to the very, very advanced devotees. Any questions or comments? Yes.
So, Maharaj, you're talking about beginning of class, creating offences. It was more of a comment, but further on in one of the purports, Prabhupada mentions that in previous years, even thinking a simple thought, there's a reaction. But in Kali Yuga, a simple thought won't bring any reaction, but a pious thought will bring a reaction. So
yeah, I read that later on in the chapter.
We get more concessions than we realise.
Yeah, luckily for us. Imagine if we had to get reactions for all our thoughts. My God. We would stand a chance. At every moment, some bad thought comes in, I remember years ago we were young brahmacharis, and we kind of like egg each other on them, you chanting your rounds properly, you're not chanting your rounds properly. You're not focusing in on the whole, let's sit around and we'll just see, and we have to be honest with each other, see if we can chant one round, but just don't think of anything else, right? And see who can do it. So we sat around, and I said, and someone thinks something else, they have to put up their hand. So So we started off within 2 seconds, and all the hands went up. You know what I mean? It's like 2 seconds. I didn't even get past a mantra. What about a round? Just one mantra. So, imagine if, we got the reactions to all our thoughts. So luckily it's a concession. But, the other side, you said that, if you think pious, I noted that Prabhupada said you get the benefits of thinking, piously and spiritually. Yeah, that's a great concession for the Kali Yuga. Yes, sir.
You mentioned the word emulate. I can't quite remember the context of that.
Sorry, I missed the first one.
You used the word emulate, referring to the pure devotees on certain platforms. So what? Obviously, we hear about them, and we aspire in Krishna consciousness to become
imitate
a devotee. So how did you say we don't emulate them, or we cannot emulate?
Well, I think imitate. I think is probably a better word. Imitate rather than we follow in their footsteps to our capacity. But to try to imitate them, to try to be on this level, feeling ecstatic symptoms or something like that, someone's actually feeling it. Don't imitate that. And Banu Maharaj was saying the other day, one should not imitate. Just like there can be crying, you can cry. One of the symptoms, ecstatic symptoms, is crying for Krishna. Like Srimati Radharani, the way she cries thinking of Krishna. They're tears of ecstasy. So don't try to be like that. Don't try to copy. Don't try to imitate. There was one godbrother of ours who, Prabhupada, of course, he was elderly and he used to use a walking stick to walk. So there was one godbrother and he was young, but somehow or other he started using a walking stick. He didn't need one. He thought that, I'll just copy Prabhupada. He's using a walking stick. And in Bali, amongst the Hindu Brahmanas, it's kind of a tradition. If you use a walking stick, you're considered, very kind of sagacious, Brahmana and very elevated personality. So they all kind of go around with walking sticks. So don't try to imitate, and actually mentioned in Hari Bhakti Vilas, don't try to, imitate the guru and even walk the way. But follow in his footsteps as far as what is his instructions, and you do follow those instructions to your capacity. Don't try to jump up to the high levels. If you have to try to do it, then you're not on that level. You understand? If you have to try, because someone who's actually on that level doesn't have to try. They're on that level automatically. But if you have to try to do it, that means you're not on that level. So don't try. But just follow in the footsteps. Jai, all glories to Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai, Go Premanandi, Hari Hari Bol.